A plumbing advertisement and an Instagram Q&A don't sound like the ingredients for major online discussions. Yet, over the past few days, both ended up generating far more conversation than anyone probably expected. One story centered on Kelton Balka and his plumbing company, Tennessee Standard. The other focused on Erin Paine and a series of answers she shared with followers online. While the subjects were completely different, both discussions eventually revolved around the same thing: the reactions people had to the way those messages were delivered. The first conversation began after screenshots from a local Facebook group started circulating online. Kelton had shared a promotional post for Tennessee Standard, introducing himself as a fifth-generation master plumber, husband to Josie Bates, and father of 4 children. The post highlighted his company's services, experience, and reputation within the community. On its own, it looked like a fairly standard local business advertisement, the kind of post that usually receives little attention outside the group where it was shared. What caught people's attention were the comments that followed. Several individuals claimed they had negative experiences with Tennessee Standard, with some alleging they had received estimates that were significantly higher than expected. One of the most discussed stories involved a homeowner who claimed another company solved a plumbing issue for far less money after Tennessee Standard had proposed a much more expensive solution. Other commenters described the company as costly compared to competitors, and as screenshots spread, those complaints quickly became the focus of discussion. The situation became even more noticeable when Kelton personally joined the conversation. Rather than allowing the criticism to circulate unanswered, he responded directly to a number of comments. He explained company practices, defended the work his team performs, challenged claims he believed were inaccurate, and emphasized the experience behind Tennessee Standard. Throughout the exchanges, he repeatedly stressed that online complaints often fail to capture the full context of a situation. As more screenshots appeared online, the discussion gradually moved beyond plumbing itself. Instead of debating repair estimates, people became increasingly interested in Kelton's responses and what they revealed about the way he handles criticism. His references to being a fifth-generation plumber, his comments about years spent in the industry, and even the way he introduced himself in the original advertisement became subjects of discussion. By that point, the conversation wasn't really about pipes or plumbing companies anymore. It had become a broader discussion about reputation, credibility, and public image. Another recurring topic involved the way Kelton incorporated family into his introduction. Several people noted that he mentioned Josie and their children before transitioning into details about the business. Some interpreted that simply as a husband and father, introducing himself to a local community. Others questioned whether the Bates connection played a role in how the company presents itself publicly. Regardless of where people landed, the focus remained on perception rather than plumbing. The interesting thing about the entire discussion is that very little of it revolved around proving whether any specific complaint was right or wrong. Instead, people became fascinated by the public exchange itself. What started as a business advertisement eventually turned into a conversation about how public figures respond when criticism appears online. A similar pattern emerged in an entirely different discussion involving Erin Paine. Unlike Kelton's situation, Erin wasn't responding to complaints or defending a company. She was answering questions submitted by followers during an Instagram Q&A. Yet her responses sparked their own wave of discussion once screenshots began making the rounds online. One of the questions asked whether her children would be allowed to attend traditional school if they wanted to. Erin responded by explaining why homeschooling has become such an important part of her family's life. She spoke about teaching from a Christian worldview, being actively involved in her children's education, understanding their academic progress, and spending more time together as a family. She described homeschooling as a gift and said she couldn't imagine doing things differently. The reaction that followed focused less on homeschooling itself and more on the answer. Many people noticed that while Erin spent considerable time explaining why she values homeschooling, she never directly addressed whether traditional school would be an option if one of her children wanted it. That observation quickly became the center of the conversation. As the discussion grew, attention turned to one specific statement Erin made about enjoying the ability to choose what her children learn. Some people viewed that as an example of intentional parenting, while others felt the wording raised questions about how much choice the children themselves might have in the future. Before long, the topic expanded into larger conversations about education, parental authority, religion, and independence. The story didn't end there. A separate Q&A answer generated another round of discussion after Erin was asked whether she would ever wear pants. Rather than giving a direct yes or no answer, she explained that she prefers dresses because they feel feminine, comfortable, timeless, and practical. On its own, the response was relatively simple, but because it followed the homeschooling discussion, many people immediately connected the two situations. Instead of focusing on the subject of dresses, commenters began talking about what they viewed as a pattern. They argued that Erin often approaches potentially controversial questions by explaining her personal perspective rather than directly addressing the specific question being asked. As more people discussed that idea, the focus shifted away from clothing entirely and toward Erin's communication style. The homeschooling and clothing discussions eventually merged into one larger conversation. People weren't debating school policies or fashion choices nearly as much as they were debating the answers themselves. Questions about Carson's future education, opportunities outside homeschooling, modesty standards, and family values all emerged along the way, but they largely stemmed from the same starting point: how Erin chooses to explain her views publicly. That's what ultimately connects these two stories. One began with a plumbing advertisement. The other began with an Instagram Q&A. Yet both discussions evolved into something much larger than their original topics. In Kelton's case, attention shifted from plumbing to the way he responded to criticism. In Erin's case, attention shifted from homeschooling and clothing to the way she answered questions. The original posts may have started the conversations, but they weren't what kept them going. Instead, people became interested in the reactions, the responses, and the impressions those responses created. That's often how online discussions grow beyond their original purpose. A simple advertisement becomes a conversation about credibility. A family Q&A becomes a conversation about communication. And once that happens, the discussion tends to take on a life of its own. What do you think? Do you understand why these posts generated so much discussion? Or do you think people were reading too much into them? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more Bates family updates, discussions, and entertainment news.